Are we just live? Is anybody in the chat? Can you hear us?
I don't know what happened. I hit the video, man. I was watching the video, but it is what it is, I guess. Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast, man. This is off to a great start on a Saturday morning. Kind of a mess, but it is what it is. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing?
Doing great. Happy to be here. I don't know what just happened, but that's kind of the theme for the week, I guess, right?
The video wasn't playing for you?
Nope. I was just staring at you guys the entire time. And it's so
cool. I had the video play on my side. I don't know what was happening there. Alex, did you have the video or no? Like the countdown?
I got the video.
Cool. So it was just me. Yeah. Was it just me yelling during the countdown?
People that
I actually heard both. I heard the countdown and I heard Tyler saying the countdown doesn't work.
I don't know. Sounds like people in the chat are saying that the countdown didn't work. So it is what it is. We'll have to go back and add that in, I guess. I don't know. But obviously we're here on a Saturday morning to discuss some big news from this week. Jerry Tillery being released by the Chargers on Thursday evening. We'll also do our final thoughts and predictions for the Chargers and 49ers game and our weekly picks, and then we'll do a Q&A as well. So first and foremost, we will be discussing the Jerry Tillery stuff. Obviously, that's kind of the big news of the week. Chargers deciding to move on from their former first-round pick, 2019 first-round pick. Just kind of running down the situation. Last week he was inactive with a back injury, which Tyler and I both heard from different people that was kind of a farce. It was not a legitimate back injury. And then this week he is missing practice for personal reasons. Now we know from other sources and not from other sources, from other publications, I should say, including ESPN's Lindsey Theory, that he was expecting an expanded role in the back half of the season, especially after Austin Johnson went down with his injury, and the Chargers wanted to keep him in that supporting role, which to me makes a lot of sense. Obviously, to Jerry, that did not make a lot of sense. The thing that's a little disappointing from the Jerry Tillery side of things is that it wasn't just a difference of opinion of the role or competing visions, as Brandon Staley said it, that there was actual friction with teammates as well, according to several of the Chargers reporters. So Chargers decided to obviously wait through the deadline, have him at the back end of the season. I assume that they were kind of vying for the comp pick formula down the road. And then unfortunately things just did not work out. So Alex, we'll start with you. You obviously wrote an article for Bolt Beat as well, but what's kind of your takeaway here from the decision to move off of Jerry Tillery? Alex, can you hear us?
I don't think the decision is. I think the way that it happened is pretty surprising. But aside from that, I mean, we knew that they turned down the 5th-year option. And that had happened. We knew that he was for very long, whether it was till the end of this year or now mid-season cut. But it is nonetheless surprising the way it happened. Obviously, the back injury, him trying to get traded prior to the deadline, or at least the Chargers, listening to teams that expressed interest. And so to be here is a pretty surprising moment and definitely a franchise altering one. It is, we do talk about the Austin Johnson thing, and Jerry Tillery was never going to play Austin Johnson's role because Jerry Tillery cannot do what Austin Johnson does, just on a week-to-week basis. But you are, removing depth, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But for the Chargers to make this decision does mean that obviously there was, friction amongst the players, friction amongst the coaching staff in terms of Tillery's role. And there obviously was a radical shift from Tillery. Like I said, he got his turn down. Last year, he played 858 snaps. He was on pace to play 460 this year, right? So clearly they had transitioned from him being a 4-down player to him just being a rotational piece. And it is just unfortunate, I think, the way it ended, because if Jerry Tillery had just kind of remained in his role, then I think you could have made the argument that Jerry Tillery actually was having an okay year just in terms of what he was doing as a pass rusher, right? Obviously had a kind of better season than he did last year. Again, used every down player as much against the run, but had some decent pressures, but was not comfortable with that role. Wanted more of a role, and he's going to have to find that somewhere else now. Yeah, just in terms of getting to where we are now, to the point where it was such a problem that they, sides felt it was in their interest to move on. Definitely disappointing part.
Yeah, it's a surprise and not a surprise. It just depends on what part of it you're asking me about. Them releasing him mid-season, I suppose, isn't a surprise, just in a vacuum. If you told me they did that, I guess it's not the biggest surprise. It's not a surprise if, like Steven talked about, we'd heard before this week, during the Falcons week, kind of what was going on with Tillery and his lack of a role. I'll say that much. But at the same time, it's like, okay, we're down another defensive tackle. Not that he was the solution or even the problem with the run defense right now, but it'd be nice to have another guy out there, especially when Morgan Fox isn't great against the run himself. As far as I just want to talk about, not that Eddie G's the only person saying this or anything. For me, with Jerry Tillery, just based on what we kind of heard from either players or media members, Jerry Tillery isn't someone people disliked, I don't think. I don't think he was a locker room problem. I just don't think he was very likable. I think that's kind of the difference here. So I know people were I know the locker room was hyped in the morning on the same day that Jerry Tillery was let go. But from my understanding, for the most part throughout his career, Jerry Tillery hasn't been an issue. He just hasn't been, and I think, I'm not going to say this username because it's a whole mess of numbers and letters. He always looked disconnected from the team, especially during training camp. And I think that's kind of what his personality and his, I don't know, whatever, throughout the most of his career has been. So I just want to say, before I say the next thing, that I haven't heard that Jerry Tillery's been a bad teammate. I haven't heard that he's been a whiner, a complainer, or anything like that. Not toxic. He just hasn't been a good player, but he's always been getting tons of snaps. As far as what happened and the reason they eventually released him, after not really having plans to do that, it's disappointing to hear that Jerry Tillery went out kind of whining. And now at this point, he wasn't getting more snaps, so he was complaining about his role, clashing with his teammates. And I just think of, Braden Fajoko, obviously, Joe Gaziano, who are now going to get their shot again. But you think of those guys, they've been cut every year since 2020, and they've outplayed Jerry Tillery, or they just had to play in the preseason and Tillery didn't. And those guys with no entitlement, no job security, they've had to be cut and shut up for years. And so I'm glad they get their shot, because if that's kind of how Tillery wanted to handle this, as a guy who's been given snaps freely his entire career up really until this year, I'm glad the new guys, or the younger-ish guys, I suppose, are getting their shot, because I'd rather have someone out there who's done the work, has earned the right to be out there more than I think Jerry Tillery has at this point. And I hope they crush it.
Yeah, it looks like Alex is back here as well. So hopefully that connection issue a little bit sorted out. But, I had heard by several people within the building that Jerry Tillery last year was getting, a golden child kind of treatment, that he was essentially, people would walk around eggshells around him. Nobody really ever felt comfortable calling him out. And obviously that kind of speaks to, the situation from a variety of standpoints. And frankly, last year, they didn't really have any other choice. Justin Jones gets injured in the second week of the year. Christian Covington is not exactly, an upgrade. Linval Joseph was in and out of the lineup. So it's not like they had the choice to just flat out bench Jerry Tillery last year. This year, they do have that choice. And so, we're going from a player who was looked at as a golden child and didn't even play in the preseason And unquestionably, essentially DT1 throughout the entire regular season, and now he's DT4 probably in terms of a snap basis. He's behind Morgan Fox, so I understand a player being upset in that kind of situation, but to handle it this way, and we don't know exactly what happened, it's definitely disappointing. I mean, you mentioned, the guys at the back end of the roster. I mean, this goes back to last year. I mean, the whole DT room we had heard was irked by the fact that they chose Eric Banks, who was not with them in training camp, to start the season off in place of Cortez Broughton and Brayton Fehoko and Joe Gaziano and Forrest Merrill and all that. And then this season, Fehoko makes the roster. The team trots him out there for that press conference afterwards. And then after week 1, they cut him for Christian Covington. And then Christian Covington's in and out of the lineup, and Otito Ogbonia in and out of the lineup. And so it definitely is frustrating that somebody like Jerry Tillery is not handling this kind of situation better. I mean, you expect these guys to be professionals, and Jerry's been in a good veteran leadership room with Linval Joseph, with Justin Jones, with Brandon Mebane, all these guys. And I just kind of would have hoped that would have rubbed off on him a little bit more. And again, we don't know all of the details, but him not handling the situation as a professional is definitely disappointing. From the Charger side of things, obviously there's a lot of people kind of complaining that they didn't trade him and all this stuff. I understand from a organizational standpoint why you would not trade Jerry Tillery. It sounds like the offers that they were getting were very minimal at best. You're probably talking about like a conditional 7th round pick or something like that. And so theoretically, if you keep Jerry Tillery in the back half of the season and he continues to play the same kind of level of football, you're probably talking about a decent contract and a decent compensatory pick in 2024 for this Chargers team. So the chances of the trade offer beating out the potential of the compensatory pick that they would get down the road is very slim. And I understand people definitely have certain thoughts about Jerry Tillery as a player, and I do as well. But from a pass rush standpoint, he was top 25 on a per play basis, and he's a former 1st round pick. Like, these kind of guys always get bigger contracts than people think. I mean, we can look at somebody like Dante Fowler, who's been a 1st round pick and always seemed to get, these kind of contracts. So I understand from an organizational standpoint why you would not trade Jerry Tillery at the trade deadline. It's just, after the deadline passed, things kind of soured to a point where it was beyond repair. So in that regard, I do not blame the Chargers. They are definitely not blameless here, especially the coaching staff and how they've kind of handled this situation over the last year and a half. But from an organizational standpoint, I'm not necessarily upset about them not trading him and hoping for that compensatory pick down the line.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's more that I guess not dealing with it now isn't so much the problem as much as not dealing with it in the off season. Because I think when they turned down that 5th year option, we heard pretty much radio silence on everything throughout, training camp until the season started. And it just kind of assumed like, well, everything's fine, like here we go. And clearly Tillery from the beginning of the season, even prior to this Austin Johnson thing, was not comfortable or, wanted or appreciative of the role he had. I guess he did want the role he had last year, which was, of an all down player. So that's kind of where we were, I guess, now. So then, obviously the Chargers didn't agree to a deal because they probably thought they could get some compensatory pick or some kind of compensation for him in the offseason. Deadline passes. We have he hurt his back powerlifting or whatever. And then we get to where we are now. And so, obviously did not play against the Falcons and then, gets cut on the Thursday. So I think that kind of thing in terms of how it's played out is troubling for the Chargers in the sense that they couldn't get something for him. But I'm also not sweating that anyway right now, because at this point, you probably get a conditional 6th or 7th round pick, like Steven said. Not sweating that so much, but I think if they had tried to trade him in the offseason or done something like that, maybe they could have gotten something for him. Or, if you're really saying that, hey, we don't actually think that there's that much of a difference between throwing Joe Gaziano out there and throwing Jerry Tillery out there, or, take those Austin Johnson snaps, then you cut Jerry Tillery in the offseason, and then kind of moved on at that time. So that, I think, is the weird part of this for me in terms of how it's playing out. But in terms of not trading him now, I think the Chargers just kind of had the internal problem that it did.
I wonder when the Chargers decided that Jerry Tillery was someone they were going to bench moving forward. Like, it was the Seahawks game was the game before the bye, and I don't remember him. Oh no, he had a couple of decent rushes, and I think he got called for roughing the passer on one that was kind of wishy-washy. I'm just curious what went into the decision to bench him now, because they were going to do that, and then there was the kind of wishy-washy back situation against the Falcons. I'm just curious what went into their decision to bench. Like, okay, I understand that run defense is a reason to not play him a lot. Like, I get that.
Sure.
But benching him completely and outright is a bit of a surprise. But then they also did, like, when they trotted out the defense against the Falcons, it was not Morgan Fox out there first. It was Christian Covington. So maybe they're just like, we're going to get all the run defenders out there, and if we can't rush the passer, so be it. I guess we'll see. We haven't seen enough yet from this Chargers team, but I'm really curious, or Chargers team after the bye, I should say. So I'm curious what went into the decision, because I know he's not great against the run, but there is a role for him. And frankly, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he still has a higher run stop rate, even though it sucks, than Morgan Fox.
Yeah, he does. I think it's like a whole full point better, but them not playing Jerry Tillery against the Falcons, I understand. You get the 4 run defenders out there against the Falcons. We saw them do a lot of that 4 defensive tackle look. I want to say it was like at least 18, 19 times where they had 4 defensive tackles out there all at once. And so I understand them not playing him against the Falcons for sure. It was just kind of puzzling going forward. So moving forward, obviously Braden Foco does take Austin Johnson's spot on the roster, like we talked about, Alex and I, on Wednesday. It sounds like, at least for this week, Joe Gaziano is going to be elevated from the practice squad. And unfortunately for the Braden Foco hive, I would expect Joe Gaziano to play over Braden Foco, just because the team traditionally does like to have, the 3 run stuffing players and then the 2 pass rushers. So I would expect the defensive tackle room to include, obviously, Sebastian Joseph Day, Christian Covington, Otito Ogbonia, and then Morgan Fox and Joe Gaziano for this week against the 49ers. So that's my opinion, right? This is kind of what the team has traditionally done over the last few years. They could certainly have all 6 defensive tackles active on the roster if they feel like they need to do that. But we haven't really seen them have all 6 active at any point on the season so far. So, I'm definitely excited to see Otito get an expanded role. I'm excited to see Joe Gaziano, Braden Foco get their chances to play. So I think this is, obviously, if there are locker room issues, this is a net positive, but I don't necessarily think this is like a clear upgrade in terms of like what the Chargers are moving forward with. But we'll see. Like I said, I'm excited to see what Otito can do in an expanded role. On a per play basis, he's actually not too far removed from what Jerry Tillery had been giving them, even though they're kind of stylistically different players, obviously. But I understand there's a lot of Jerry Tillery hate out there, man, but he's had some good moments as a pass rusher this year. So I don't think that they're necessarily going to improve in that regard.
Yeah, we'll see what they do with the defensive tackles. Obviously, Otito's getting a bigger role, and he's someone that they worked in with the first team during training camp, about like halfway through training camp. So they obviously want to get him involved, and that will be a full Coach Ed starting defensive front with Sebastian Joseph Day, Morgan Fox, and Otito. So he should get a little paycheck there. As far as Fehoko and Gaziano, I could see them keeping all 6 active. It kind of depends. Well, yeah, all 6 active. I suppose it depends on what they want to run this week. It looks like Rumph is close to being back, but he won't be back. So if they do experiment more with that 6-man front with throwing James at the edge, takes Kenneth Murray off the field, takes Kyle Van Noy, and Atauchu and Tuska off the field in favor of Derwin James. And I think you should have 6 active, because having 4 down defensive tackles and having only 1 rotational guy after that is a bit messy. Not that they only ran 6-1 the entire game against the Falcons, but if that's something they want to experiment against, I don't know, one of the best rushing teams in the league, then I would assume that they would keep 6 active. And even if it came down to 5, I still think they would pick Fehoko. They did list him as a defensive end when they signed him. I don't think that makes, like, he's not an edge rusher by any means.
No.
But I'm curious what that means for his role, and I'm curious what is Gaziano designated as a DT or a D end?
I assume he would be the same.
Yeah, I was just curious how they would, siphon those two out or differentiate those two.
Yeah, the other thing
I think
too.
The last time I think I saw Gaziano listed, I think it was DE technically. But yeah, I think in terms of the short-term, consequences for this defensive line in this tackle room, you obviously want to see the six-man room, I think, for the Chargers just kind of try their best against the 49ers, because that's going to be certainly a challenge. But yeah, if Braden Fehoko obviously can have a great game, that's great. Joe Gaziano can at least play at the level Jerry Tillery was playing at. I think that that's a fine, debut game kind of for the Chargers. Long term, though, I think that, this is, precedent-setting move, obviously, for the Chargers in terms of what they did with Tillery here. I don't know if people want to talk about it yet, but they have a 5th-year option to determine on Kenneth Murray next year. And Kenneth Murray is honestly kind of in the same place that Jerry Tillery was last year in terms of the level of play that he's given the team, level of responsibility that he's given the team as well. And so for Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley to kind of make this decision might give, people a preview in terms of what the Chargers are thinking about doing next year in terms of Kenneth Murray on that 5th-year option. And, we'll see how they kind of handle that situation as well. But obviously the Chargers had never cut a first-round pick. They had never even declined a 5th-year option, despite Jason Barrett's injuries at the time, despite DJ Fluker not really panning out. They never declined one. And so for them to have a midseason cut of this, caliber, I guess, and also deal with the fallout of it and be willing to kind of cut their losses on the Tillery situation, not even play the season out with him, is definitely a big move for that locker room culturally and definitely for the culture as a whole of this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that 5th-year option for Kenneth Murray should absolutely not be picked up. That would be a huge mistake, in my opinion. In terms of the active roster, it's a really weird situation. I'm unclear on how this is going to play out because Jerry Tillery was waived, but I think it was Ian Rappaport or it might have been Jeremy Fowler, I can't even remember, reported that the team essentially was like waiving him in the future. Like he wasn't officially going to be waived until like Monday. So then a team couldn't claim him this week. So I don't know if
he was waived. I think he was waived yesterday and then he can be claimed starting Monday or Tuesday. Not sure.
Okay. So he is officially off of the roster in terms of being off of the 53.
Correct.
I believe so.
Okay. Because the way that it was reported was confusing to me. I was like, okay, so he's on the roster until Monday, but he's off of the team. So there we go. I guess theoretically, then they could sign Joe Gaziano to the active roster today if they wanted to.
It's so tricky because they won't put half of their hurt players on IR or anything, which I understand. But, we have day-to-day Keenan Allen for the next 4 weeks. And, Mike Williams is still there and Rumph is still, not on IR. And I get why, but it's so tricky because, like in theory, Pipkins could be on IR. Rumph could have been on IR, but all these guys may or may not play. So it's tough to determine what the roster even looks like right now and how to fill things back and forth. Let's say if they activate Keemon Hall and then keep him activated during the game.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, they're going to have to elevate a practice squad tackle too if Trey Pipkins can't play. So very tricky roster management happening this week. So, in terms of the other injuries, right, I will say it does sound like we probably see Mike Williams and Chris Rumph back next week against the Chiefs, which would be huge for this team. And then again, they'll have to do some other roster management things with Jeremiah Atautu and Derek Tuska and all that. Doesn't sound like Keenan will be back next week. Although they said that they like his process a lot better at this point. So maybe he actually starts to practice again next week. I don't know. And then it did sound like on Wednesday that Brandon Staley indicated that Joey Bosa might start practicing next week. So we'll get some clarity there. But I think that's really it in terms of injuries. And then I forget who tagged us in it earlier, Tyler, but I guess Corey Lindsley did say that he was actually in the hospital with his food poisoning a few weeks ago, which A, explains why he did not play, and B, I think also explains why he didn't play super well against the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, nasty business. I apologize for not remembering who tagged me in that, but thank you for finding that and clipping that out and tagging me in that. So that was great. But yeah, food poisoning, sending you to the hospital. Maybe it was just for an IV. But if it was more than that, like, goodness gracious, what did you eat?
Yeah, don't ever go back to that restaurant wherever.
Yeah, can you tell me which restaurant that was? I don't want to go there.
Might have had one of those expired Costco pumpkin pies. I don't know if he had one of those.
Yeah. So I am going to Costco later.
And time out. Who the hell decided that I'm eating the fucking jalapeno poppers?
Oh, I did.
Yeah. I was watching the video, and oh, hey, you guys should eat a hot pepper thing from my company. And it's like, oh yeah, we'll have Tyler do that for not being here. Like, oh, thanks. Like, I was going to be there, but like,
I mean, I'm doing the pumpkin pie. I frankly would.
I'd rather eat the pumpkin pie.
I was gonna say I'd rather eat
I thought we were just snaking it. So I thought it was Steven then Tyler then me. I just thought that's how it works.
I mean, I'll do it if the Chargers win tomorrow. Sure, I will die on camera, but.
I mean, look, the best possible option is that Tyler eats the pepper after the Chargers beat the Niners, and then I do something ridiculous after the Chargers beat the Chiefs. So, if those two things happen, then hallelujah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Tyler, if you want to trade me, I'll gladly trade you.
It's kind of funnier to punish myself with a pepper than a pie. Like, I think a pepper, I just kind of get over it and feel okay. Pie sounds like, I don't know if I could handle a pumpkin pie.
All right. So like I said, I'm going to Costco later today. They do have a new batch of pumpkin pies, I guess. So we'll figure it out. All right. We'll get to our weekly picks this week, and then we'll take some questions as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now. And obviously the super chats are appreciated. As it currently stands, I am in first place, 22-13. And then Tyler, Alex fighting it out for second place right now at 18-17. So it is my turn to go first this week. And so I'm going to take the team I feel like we are always picking every single week. I'm going to take the Eagles as my favorite over the Washington Commanders.
Bold. But you know what? If Alex or I picked them right now, they absolutely would have lost. I don't think so. I was going back through all the weeks. All my favorites that I've picked, I think I've gotten 2 right. Otherwise, it's somebody upsetting somebody. So maybe I should just pick the Chiefs from now on. Who are the Chiefs playing this week?
Jaguars.
Okay. Let me pick that one, and they will lose.
I think Alex is next, if I remember the order correctly.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to pick another NFC East team. I'm going to pick the New York Football Giants coming off of a bye. They are minus 4.5 at home against the Texans. I don't know how that's not bigger, considering, I mean, just the Texans as a whole. And also, I know the Giants are injured, but they have a top 3 running back in the league, and the Texans have one of the worst run defenses. I feel like that game could get into boat race territory pretty quick. So I will take the Giants over the Texans.
Yeah, I was actually looking at the Thanksgiving Day games here, and then we got Cowboys Giants, which on a normal year probably not a very exciting matchup, but this year should be a lot of fun next week. All right, Tyler, so you're officially going Chiefs over Jaguars for your favorite?
Yes, I'm going to test the theory that I screw every team that I pick for favorites. So let's do this one. Also, I love Jorge Rodriguez's idea that Alex should go to every grocery store and return every shopping cart out in the parking lot if the Chiefs lose to the Chargers.
That's a good one, man. That's a good one in honor of Justin Herbert. So
yeah, and Alex being an absolute stickler when it comes to that.
All right, Tyler, your underdog pick.
Oh, I get an underdog pick. Hold on. I'm going to take the Vikings over the Bills, especially because one Josh Allen may or may not play.
Yeah. That situation obviously could be potentially dicey, but we'll see what happens there. All right, Alex, you're next.
Yeah, I am gonna go with the fighting Geno Smiths again, who are somehow a 2.5-point dog to the Buccaneers on a neutral field. I don't get it at all. I get that the Bucs won last week, but like I don't really understand it at all. Seattle's just playing at a much higher level than Tampa Bay right now, who kind of had to grind to get by last game. I will take Seattle in that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a ton of great underdog picks. I guess I can
recommend one, but I'll probably be wrong. Matthew Stafford is not playing potentially.
Yeah, but that requires me picking Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray.
And Kyler Murray also will not be playing.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to go who are they playing? I'm going to go Steelers over Saints. TJ Watt returning this week. So I'm going to go Steelers over Saints. What a pick.
Yeah.
That's
a game.
I know, right?
That is a game.
And then either or here, let's see. I'm going to go Cowboys over Packers. Obviously, do not trust Aaron Rodgers one bit here. Probably could have picked them as one of the favorites, but yeah, I expect that Dallas defense to go crazy this week.
Yeah. I think it's
all right. Alex is next. Yep.
Yeah.
My turn. Ooh. I think I'm going to do one of my like reverse jujus here. I'm going to take Josh McDaniels and the Las Vegas Raiders over the fighting Jeff Saturdays and the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, like, I don't know what to expect out of the Colts this week. I guess they could like rally themselves to a win, but that seems like a complete tire fire situation. Not that the Raiders are much better, but they still have Devontae Adams and Derek Carr, so I'll take that over where the Colts are at right now, I guess. Yeah. I'm also just kind of torturing myself because I want to be invested in that game because it's going to be ugly. So, yeah, I'll take the Raiders in that one.
Listen, man, if you're the Raiders and you like blow a lead to the Colts in this situation, you have to fire Josh McDaniels. Like, you do not have a choice. I mean, we're talking about a team that literally is like over the last 4 weeks benched Matt Ryan, fired their offensive coordinator, fired their head coach, and hired some ESPN analyst off of the street to be their head coach, man. And like their quality control coach on offense is going to be their new offensive coordinator. It's just like, man, what a mess.
Yeah. Disaster. I hope Indy wins because I know the Chargers will beat Indy, but like, I don't want to be the team that Indy beats when they need a win and they're dunking Gatorade on Jeff Saturday for his first win against the Chargers after they went 2-0 against the Niners and Chiefs. Like, I want them to win at some point the next couple of weeks so we can avoid that. For my pick, almost funny, I almost would pick the Colts just to be hilarious, but I'm going to go with the Broncos over the Titans.
Is Ryan Tannehill still out?
I think it's up in the air.
I think that they reported he's leaning towards playing this week.
Sick.
Sick. I'm locking it in.
Lock it in.
It's in Denver though, isn't it?
I don't know. I just picked the teams.
Okay.
I think it's in Tennessee.
Yeah, it's in Tennessee.
Sick. Hit bold. Highlight it. Lock it in.
I actually thought about this throughout the week. Obviously, Teresa Compapas, what former player would make you hire to be the head coach of the Chargers? Obviously, not including Philip Rivers. He says. So if the Chargers were in this kind of situation, theoretically, like the direct translation obviously would be like firing Ronaldo Hill, then firing Brandon Staley, and then you hire like a defensive-minded head coach to replace them. So the equivalent would maybe be like Sean Merriman or like Sean Phillips, like one of those two players. I don't know.
The most yoked model dating team in the AFC West. Who would I pick?
Because Jeff Saturday has high school coaching experience, and that's like it. And I guess his high school record was like 3-7 last year.
Well, obviously, like Drew Brees would be someone you could pick. I'm gonna pick a non-quarterback. See, I would go offensive player here. I don't think I would go.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly could if you're answering the question. I'm just saying, like, if you did like the direct translation of the Colts situation to the Chargers, you know, because they're keeping their version of Joe Lombardi in Gus Bradley, and like their defensive structure is intact, but so that to me would be like the Chargers, like going off of Ronaldo Hill and then off of Brandon Staley, and then essentially like hiring somebody to come in and fix the defense and be a defensive coach, I guess.
I mean, if we're talking about like all-time like Charger legend brought in to be like a sacrificial lamb to whatever this season is, if we were in the Colts position, then I feel like Antonio Gates would have to be the guy. Like Antonio Gates is kind of like Chargers Jeff Saturday if we were to go that route. So
I get that. Yeah. he's in the building a lot. So,
Yeah. I mean, he's connected to the team. I just thought it was funny, like with the Colts situation, that like I just made the joke of like, oh, Peyton Manning can be QB coach, and then I found out Reggie Wayne actually is their wide receiver coach right now, and so it just is. We're just hiring everybody from like 10 years ago. So
yeah, absolutely. Been such a weird situation. Sorry for hitting my mic right there, but it's all good. All right, we'll get to some of our final thoughts here and make our Chargers score predictions here. So if you're in the chat right now, feel free to drop your prediction for the Chargers outcome on Sunday night against the 49ers. So I started the picks. I will start the Chargers prediction this week. Unfortunately, I can't get there to pick the Chargers to win this week. Again, I feel that this is probably going to be an 0-3 week for us back-to-back weeks, but the Niners are getting incredibly healthy, and frankly, I'm just really nervous about what this run defense or this 49ers rushing attack is going to drum up against the Chargers. You have obviously Christian McCaffrey in the fold and really, changes that offense. Deebo Samuel is back. Elijah Mitchell is back, who ran for 1,200 yards last year for the 49ers. So going up against the Chargers run defense is as big of a mismatch as I think you can have. And obviously the Nick Bosa situation, potentially going up against Foster Sarell or Storm Norton, obviously makes me nervous as well. That being said, I do think the Chargers do have a formula for success, which is force Jimmy G into some errant throws, which we know as he is prone to do. And then Justin Herbert continues to build off of last week, which I think is possible against the 49ers defense, even despite the pass rush. That said, I'm going to go. I do think the Chargers cover the point spread here, but I do think they lose. I'm going to go Niners win 27-23. So I do think the Chargers make it close just because I think Jimmy G is going to give them some chances that he probably shouldn't. So I'm going to go Chargers lose 27-23.
Who's next? Should I go?
Yeah, you go, Alex.
This one, I just can't get to a position where I even think it's a close game. We don't even know if they're playing Foster Sarell or Storm Norton against Nick Bosa. Maybe it doesn't matter, but like at the same time, like I just think if you were to pick one team who, other than probably the Eagles, who is like an absolute nightmare matchup for the Chargers on the ground, in the air, like just everything they do offensively with the weapons they have and the coaching in terms of the Kyle Shanahan situation, it's the Niners. Like, and I think we've all said at certain points this week that we feel more confident about the Chargers potentially beating the Chiefs than the Niners, and I think a lot of that just has to do with the matchup. Like, I think Kyle Shanahan is going to look at Kenneth Murray and Kyle Van Noy and, just basically like go at them like every single, outside run play with, Christian McCaffrey in tow. This is also the Niners coming off of a bye. They've had a chance to, really get Christian McCaffrey into the playbook there. Oh, and not to mention they have Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and like the whole platoon that they have there in terms of their weapons. So I the Chargers obviously are dealing with a ton of health issues too. Just cut Jerry Tillery, lost depth there. Austin Johnson done for the year. They're not getting Keenan Allen or Mike Williams back. This game, to me, I think I'm going to predict a very similar score to what the Chargers-Seahawks game was. I'm going to say Niners 34, Chargers 17. I think this one gets away from the Chargers fairly quickly. I hope that I am wrong, but if you were to pick one NFL team really outside of those top three and the Bills, Chiefs, and Eagles that really can give the Chargers problems, it is this Niners team.
Yeah, I won't predict the same gap in score, but I understand where you're coming from, especially because you watch teams that the Chargers have been rolled a couple of times this year to that kind of score. So it's not like it's impossible. We literally just saw it a couple of weeks ago before the bye.
I mean, we saw it against the Jaguars.
Right. Right. And Lawrence played really well that game and Geno played pretty solid, but neither of them did anything phenomenal, but the system that they were running from the offensive coordinator was just beating the crap out of this defense. And that's really what it comes down to for me, and also the health of the offense. If you saw Arjun's recent graphic, the Chargers on the ground or against the run are expected to give up 7.71 yards per attempt on the ground. That is, I think, 2 yards worse than the 31st team. Their run defense is terrible. Look at the graph. Go find Arjun's post. It's like a little increase for every
timing,
team, and then it's just Chargers way worse than everybody else. And the crazy thing is, I know people are talking about Jimmy Garoppolo. Is he a great quarterback? No, but the system is built so he can be good statistically. Jimmy Garoppolo's adjusted EPA per play is higher than Jalen Hurts right now. And that's, have been kind of sort of without Debo recently as well. The Chargers, Daniel Jeremiah, I think, pointed out recently on Twitter, the 49ers are one of the best yards after catch, yards after contact, open field tackling teams he's ever seen, or receiving teams, I should say, that he's ever seen. So the Chargers had to face a really great rushing attack and a really good yak team that's literally built on those two things on the road with all these injuries. And I just don't see how fans can say that they expect the Chargers to win this one. We get messages and tweets quite a bit. Oh, you're not a real fan if you don't believe in your team. But we're all either on our first or our second degree. We finished our second degrees. I don't think we got there by just being like, oh, no happened. So, there's just too much that goes into this. I would love for them to win. As I said on Twitter, it is financially so much better if we predict them to win and if they actually win. But I have to predict a loss here. I'm going to go Chargers lose 30-21. And for those citing the 200 rushing yards and they still won against the Browns and the Falcons, I just don't see it's a different beast. The 49ers have a much better defense than either of those two teams. And frankly, they have a better offense too. And I just watch those games again. After we jumped on the show after those two games, what were we talking about? How freaking lucky and weird it was the Chargers won those games.
Yeah.
The Browns one was super weird. It was kind of off a fluke. And the Falcons one, some D lineman, Herbert used the force and he dropped, the fumble. Unless that happens, unless Khalil Mack is stripping Debo Samuel, unless Herbert forces somebody else to fumble, and unless Jimmy Garoppolo is going to miss a wide open Kyle Pitts or George Kittle, I should say. Mariota was missing dudes last week. It's
right.
You're relying on things to happen again that shouldn't be considered reliable in football. It's just not going to happen. It'd be great. Hey, it'd be great, but I don't know what people are thinking when they say the Chargers are going to win this one and they feel good about that.
Yeah, I mean, weird stuff can always happen, right? Like we talked about with the Cleveland game where Jacoby Brissett gives Alohi Gilman a ball and the forced strip fumble on the Falcons. But, just in this game, I think when you talk about from a coaching standpoint, if Kyle Shanahan is seeing, Kyle Van Noy and Kenneth Murray getting abused in the run game, he's not going to turn it off, right? He's not going to go, oh, we need a couple more Jimmy G throws this quarter, right? He's just going to keep doing it. with Christian McCaffrey and, you know, all those weapons that they have there and George Kittle blocking. So like at this point, like, I don't know what, you know, I think the Chargers can win any game in which Justin Herbert is their quarterback. And we saw a bounce back game for Justin Herbert, you know, after the injuries last week, in terms of just how he looked and how he was throwing the ball. But yeah, this is just a terrible matchup for them. I think that you know, there is a potential route to them winning and keeping it close throughout the game. The Niners are by no means, or at least haven't manifested themselves into this like dominant team so far this season yet, as Chargers fans will probably point out, in terms of their record, in terms of where they are as a team. But they're getting ready to turn the corner after this bye week, and I don't know. Like, I just don't trust this team. I think the Niners have a better coaching staff. The Niners have a better head coach. The Niners have a better defense. And the Niners really just have everything to expose all of the weaknesses of the Chargers, right? And so at this point, I'd love to see the Chargers win. I think they're capable of, you know, eking out maybe one of those close games wins, and maybe Jimmy G makes a couple of mistakes and we get that kind of Browns and Falcons results. But it's hard to even come close to picking them in this one for me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've been pretty clearly established with our brand at this point, which is that we're not super homers, we're not doom and gloomers either. You know, we have, you know, done this for the last 3 years where we're trying to be as subjective as possible and try and cut through the crap and call it how it is. So it's not that the Niners are a juggernaut team. Like, this isn't the Bills, who I think are the best team in the league, but it's just that the Niners do everything well that the Chargers struggle with. Like, this is just a bad matchup for the Chargers on paper. And like I said, the Chargers have a path to victory. I just don't know how likely that is. I went back and watched a couple of the Niners games this year, and against the Rams, they have, a couple chances. The Rams had a couple chances at turnovers and just didn't get them done, right? Jalen Ramsey dropped an interception. I forget which safety, missed the chance at a fumble from Christian McCaffrey. They just didn't do that. Maybe the Chargers can. Maybe the Chargers are able to take advantage of those opportunities. Maybe Justin Herbert is, able to play just a perfect game and they're able to kind of, escape with a victory. It is possible. I just don't think it is probable. It's not something that I would feel comfortable predicting.
Yeah, I'm not taking the 2 out of 100 call over the 98 out of 100 call because it's like, yeah, it could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what happens. I mean, we'll be here after the game tomorrow. We'll be going live to have a conversation, and hopefully it's after a win. So all right, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. Obviously super chats are appreciated today, as they are every single week, and we'll take questions for about 12-13 minutes or so.
Wait, I want to take a picture of all of us. Hold on. I want this one up here. All right. You guys want to take a picture? I want to take this for later. Everybody say cheese. All right, cool. That's going to go. That'll be my new banner photo.
Oh, man. The other thing that people will always come say back to me is oh, the Niners are 4-4. They lost to the Bears and the Broncos. What's the difference? And it's well, the Bears game was a freaking monsoon. That was a legitimate, can't even throw the ball kind of toss-up game. And then the Broncos have an elite defense that can match the 49ers offense. The Chargers don't have that. So the other loss that the Niners have experienced was the Chiefs, who, again, the Chargers don't have Andy Reid and Travis Kelce and all these other weapons to kind of take advantage of the Niners defense. So, I don't put too much stock into the record. You have to look at this as an individual matchup, and I just don't feel good about it.
Yeah. You muted, Alex.
I said the Broncos game was in Denver too, right? For the Niners.
Yeah, it was Sunday Night Football, and it was 10-8. It was.
Yeah, it was I thought it was 12-11. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So I wouldn't put a ton of stock into that result, considering how weird games are in Denver, and then putting a loss to the Bears in their record when the lines on the out of bounds thing were bent because there was too much rain and the paint was rubbing off. Like, I wouldn't really hold that against the Niners either.
Yeah. The Chargers are also 2 of their 3 starting receivers are shorter than my fiance. So, like, I don't know how much we're thinking the Chargers are going to go out and dominate this one either.
I didn't realize Janae was that tall, man.
Yeah, she's 5'10".
Oh, wow.
So she's taller than Bandy and Carter.
There you go. A bunch of people have asked this question to me. DK pointing this out, surprised they didn't want to try Brendan Hymus at right tackle. Hymus is apparently injured as well. So I understand the concept here, right? Brendan Hymus played offensive tackle at Nebraska. He was somebody that I thought could play offensive tackle in the league if necessary. But I mean, they feel pretty clearly that he's an interior offensive lineman, doesn't have the size profile or the athletic profile that they like at tackle. He's also never played right tackle in his life. He was exclusively left tackle in college. He's been exclusively a guard and a center in the NFL. So they are very intentional about what kind of size and athletic profile that they want to see at tackle. And obviously Jamari Sawyer's he doesn't really fit that athletic profile, but he fits the size profile. So I feel like you have to have either or, and they pretty clearly think that Brendan Hymus does not have either of the size or the athletic profile that they prefer to have at tackle. And like I said, never played right tackle in his life.
So, but still over Storm Norton.
Yeah, I think my thing with right tackle in this game, just in general, is like this thing throughout the week is like, oh, maybe it's Serrell, maybe it's Norton. Guess you'll find out on like the next episode of Dragon Ball Z when the game starts. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's like the best strategy going into this one. Maybe they've already picked one and they're trying to like fool the Niners here or like make them think. But I don't think the Niners are staying up at night exactly thinking about who Nick Bosa is going to carve up, because you could probably put either one out there and I think they're just fine. But yeah, I don't know if it makes a difference this game, like who they put at right tackle. I would put Norton out there personally just because he's the most experienced. But I guess the Serrell experiment, we've seen crazier things happen. But yeah.
Yeah, man, I still would start Storm Norton. Like I understand like people are frustrated by the way that he has played, but oh man, putting Foster Serrell out in this game is just I feel so bad for him that his first NFL start would be in this kind of situation against Nick Bosa. Like
Steven, Foster Serrell, like Trey Pipkins made it work. So Foster Serrell should also make it work. Tell me about that.
It's such a frustrating thing. Like, not every situation has a comparison that you should be making.
No.
I mean, Trey Pipkins was a top 100 draft pick, and I understand, you know, he was probably overdrafted, but he was a Senior Bowl guy. He was a top 100 draft pick. He had shown some good flashes in the past, and so yes, he struggled in the preseason last year, and Foster Serrell struggled in the preseason this year. That's the only comparison here. I mean, Trey Pipkins rightfully went to work with Duke Manyweather and got his technique issues sorted out. You know, it's not like we can send Foster Serrell to boot camp with Duke Manyweather this week and he's going to come out and play well against Nick Bosa. And again, if this were like against the Houston Texans, all right, like sure, whatever, let's see what happens. This is Nick Bosa. This is the guy who I think is the best pass rusher in the league right now. And it's going to be his first career start. Like, I understand like there's a lot of optimism and people are trying to like salvage things and whatever and cope in their own way. I'm not a fan please kind of guy. I'm an expectations guy. And I there's no way for me to expect Foster Serrell to come in his first career start against Nick Bosa and play well. Like, there's just no way.
Big expectations guy.
Yeah. Even Jamari Sawyer, like I know there's a lot of hype around his performance against the Browns, but it wasn't necessarily that Sawyer in pass protection played really well. I mean, he did based on expectation, but they were getting the ball out really quick too. Like, the scheme is going to have to help Serrell as well. So maybe there's a world where the run game works. They have a quick passing offense and Serrell doesn't give up a sack or more than one, but expecting him to hold up is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and the difference I would say with Salyer, and you can talk about obviously Pipkins in this case, is Salyer is someone who probably should have been a top 100 draft pick. And when it comes to Pipkins, he was obviously that. So the physical tools that those guys had coming out of college, and in terms of their nature of them being projected to be offensive tackles eventually at some point, Tom Telesco drafting Pipkins to be a project, Salyer probably expected to make slightly more of an instant impact when he was drafted. But yeah, I think they just thought highly of those guys. Sarrell is not a guy that they thought nearly as highly of. So for them to potentially start him over North, have North there because he perhaps he proves us wrong, but he does not have the upside that Pipkins or Salyer have at their peaks.
Right. Sure. Chorizo.
Thanks, Mom.
Oh,
sorry.
Thanks, Mom.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We've gotten a lot of questions about this over the last couple of weeks or so. What do you guys attribute the batted passes coming from Justin Herbert? Chorizo says that he thinks he looks like he's sidearming a little bit more, dropping his elbow a little bit more. Tyler, what are your thoughts here about the batted passes from Justin Herbert recently?
Well, he's throwing to players that are shorter than my fiance, and it's a quick passing game. So that's kind of it to me.
Yeah. That, and I mean, as much as like run stick as a Joe Lombardi like meme at this point, like if you are running that many bunched up routes in succession on some drives, like was it the first or second drive last week, and Herbert had one of those batted balls that I think ended a drive, then those are kind of going to happen if you are running that many bunched up plays. And then Joe Lombardi sort of in the second quarter and in the second half in general sort of opens up the playbook, uses, kind of goes a little bit further, obviously, than 5 yards down the field, starts using the ends a little bit more, then, you start seeing fewer batted balls through Herbert throughout the game. So I think some of it is definitely the play calling. I think some of it is definitely Herbert still coming back from injury, and, potentially side arming or dropping his elbow, like Chorizo is pointing out. But I think it's kind of sure of a lot of things. And then, like Tyler pointing out, they just don't have the guys right now in the receiver room.
Yeah, and I think also the injury here is definitely impacting his ability to really kind of get the lift that he wants. I mean, he's also 6'6", so he's not going to have a super high launch angle anyway. So I think there's a lot of factors here, but I do think the injury has absolutely impacted the amount of batted passes that are happening on a week-to-week basis. And the other thing too is they do a lot of like quick 3-step drops, and offense, their defensive linemen are starting to figure out that they don't even have to rush. They can just like kind of chill at the line of scrimmage and jump up and maybe get a batted pass. So Chargers have to make some adjustments in that regard for sure. Servando wants to know if the Chargers win against the 49ers or the Chiefs, are they a playoff team? So obviously Chargers currently sitting in the 7th seed at 5-3. I tweeted out the next 4 games for each of the teams in the AFC that are in the wild card contention. And some of those teams have some pretty difficult schedules. So we'll see what happens there. But I think if the Chargers win one of these next 2, I think you absolutely should feel good about their playoff chances. They would at that point be 6-4. You have some final games against the Colts and the Rams, who are not very good. I mean, maybe this is the year they finally figured out in Denver. But the Chargers schedule is pretty manageable. I mean, the Cardinals are not a juggernaut by any means, and obviously Kyler Murray's situation kind of up in the air. So if the Chargers can win one of these next 2, I think you feel really good about their playoff chances down the stretch.
Yeah, honestly, 5-5 is not great, but even like I'm fine. Like if they go 5-5, they lose their next 2 games, I get it. Your guys aren't around. You're not healthy, and these are 2 good teams. So really, as long as they don't get more hurt, which has been half the issue this year anyway, if they just after the next 2 weeks against the Colts is their 3rd game in this 3-game stretch, or the Cardinals.
You mean the next one?
Whoever's after the Chiefs.
So after Chiefs, it's the then it's the Cardinals, and then it's the Titans, Dolphins, and then it's Colts, Rams, Broncos.
Awesome. Great at paying attention over here. Like if everyone kind of comes back against the Cardinals and the team looks pretty ready to go, I still feel good about their chances. So I just them winning against the Falcons is huge. If they lose the next two, all good. They win one, great.
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to be 6-4 after this stretch, if you're saying they win one against the Niners or Chiefs, then hard to call them a lock for the playoffs with 7 games left. But you'd probably just have to go 4-3 or 3-4 in that stretch, probably 4-3, then to make the playoffs, and that is kind of a more manageable stretch for them. And then even if they're 5-5, like Tyler said, I think that they can kind of have a more manageable stretch. You obviously got Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Joey Bosa back at some point, in that final stretch of the season. So currently they are a playoff team because they're in the 7th seed. I guess the distinction here is, are we just talking playoff team or like contender? Because I think the Chargers right now are certainly a playoff team. On the other hand, I would not put them in like a playoff contender type tier right now. Just
Sure.
based on where they are. So like that's kind of the distinction for me, I guess.
Yeah. So again, everybody that is trying to come at us for being too negative, all three of us just said that they still have a really good chance at the playoffs. So there you go. In terms of the AFC teams, obviously the Jets currently have the first wild card spot, I should say, according to their division and conference record. So they play at New England, home against the Bears, at Vikings, at Bills in their next 4 games. The Dolphins are 6-3. They're the next wild card team. They play the Browns, the Texans, at Niners, at Chargers in the next 4 games. Then we just talked about our schedule, obviously at Niners, home against Chiefs, at Cardinals, at Raiders. So that's the game that I forgot. So my apologies there. The Patriots after that, home against the Jets, at Vikings, home against the Bills, at Cardinals, and then Bengals 5-4 are the final potential wild card team. At Steelers, at Titans, home against the Chiefs, home against the Browns in their next 4 games. So should get some clarity with that particular seeding in that group in the next 3 or 4 weeks moving forward. One other thing here. Shout out Mike Tannenbaum, man. He apparently loves Justin Herbert so much that he's predicting the Chargers to win every single game from here on out. And the Chargers going 14-3, which would be, I assume, the 1 seed in the AFC.
Love the optimism.
Yeah. Cool, dude.
Sorry, I was just typing up something. There we go. All right, any other questions that you guys see, or wrap it up today?
No, I think we can wrap it up.
All right, sounds good. Alex, any final thoughts before we head out for today, man?
I hope that the Chargers win 34-17 instead of lose 34-17 like I predicted. So hoping for a good podcast after the game where they beat the Niners, because obviously, like we talked about, that kind of puts them into that serious, playoff tier, if you want to say that. Obviously, if they do beat the Niners with how beat up they are right now, with everything kind of lining up for the Niners after a bye week, getting their players back and reloading. So this is a pretty critical game for the Chargers. I wouldn't call it must win, obviously, because they do have the margin for error now after beating Atlanta, and they can lose one or maybe even both of these next 2 games against the Niners and Chiefs and still, kind of contend for the playoffs. But yeah, this is one that I would love to have as sort of a state for the Chargers, but just to kind of pick up the momentum here for them going into the second half of the season in general.
Yep, absolutely. Win or lose, even if they lose, I hope it's just close, man. I don't want 2 back-to-back, primetime blowouts. But win or lose, just be healthy. Get out of there healthy. If you go 0-2, I get it. I expect it. Just stay healthy. That's all I ask.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see what happens, man. I'm excited for this upcoming stretch. I do think this is a really cool opportunity for the Chargers to really kind of prove where they're at over the next couple of games. So like I said, we'll be going live tomorrow evening, right after the game is officially over. Should be about 1 a.m. Alex's time. So make sure and send some good coffee vibes or soda vibes his way as we try and work our way through daylight savings ending. So appreciate everybody in the chat today. Appreciate all of the support. And as always, make sure and like, subscribe, turn the notifications on. and leave a rating or review if you're listening to this on the audio platform of your choice. All right, guys, that's going to do it. We'll see you tomorrow.